Hi, guys. Welcome to today's episode of Bible in a Year. And so far, we've been seeing a very confrontational Moses and Pharaoh about to get heated up. How does it end? Let's take a listen. And the air in the throne room was cold, despite the Egyptian sun. Moses stood before Pharaoh one last time, his voice no longer a whisper but a resonant thunder. Thus says the Lord, about midnight I will go out into the midst of Egypt, and every firstborn in the land shall die. Pharaoh's face wore a mask of granite, but his eyes had a flicker of fear. Moses did not wait for a dismissal. He turned his back on the living God King, knowing the time for words had ended and the time for the final terrible sign had begun. Under the silver light of a daring moon, Moses and Aaron gathered the elders. The instructions were precise. A lamb without blemish, its blood struck upon the lintels and doorposts of every Hebrew home. It is the Lord's Passover, Moses explained. Aaron stood beside him, holding a basin of hyssop. They were marking a boundary not of stone, but of covenant, a seal that would whisper life to the angel of death as it swept through the silent streets of Goshen. At the midnight, the silence of Egypt was shattered by a cry that rose from every house, from the hovels of the poor to the heights of the palace. Pharaoh sat on the floor of his chambers, his royal robes discarded. Beside him stood his most trusted general, whose head was bowed in a grief that transcended rank. The crown prince lay still, and in that moment the God of Egypt was merely a broken father. Rise up, Pharaoh said. Tell them to get out from among my people. Go, serve your Lord as you have said. And so the exodus began, not with a march, but with a hurried rhythmic pulse of a nation in motion. Moses led the way, his staff a rhythmic beat against the desert floor. Beside him walked a young leader of the tribe of Judah, who carried the gold and the silver the Egyptians had thrust upon them in their haste to see the Hebrews gone. The people carried their dough before it was even leavened, their kneading bowls wrapped in their cloaks. They were people born in a single night, walking out of the iron furnace towards the scent of freedom. As they reached the edge of the wilderness, the path ahead of them was no longer a mystery. A massive pillar of cloud, swirling with the texture of a gathering storm, descended from the heavens to lead them by the day. Moses and Aaron stood at the front of the camp, shielding their eyes as they looked up the towering phenomenon. By night, the cloud became a pillar of fire. It became their compass. But the heart of the king was not yet finished with his rebellion. In the ruins of Tanis, Pharaoh stood atop his war chariot, his eyes fixed on the horizon. What is this we have done, he hissed, that we have let Israel go from serving us? He ordered his 600 chosen chariots to be ready, the sound of bronze hitting the leather. Pharaoh took the reins himself, his face twisted into a snarl of regained pride, leading his army into the dust of retreating Hebrews. The Hebrews were trapped now. To their front lay the churning expanse of the Red Sea. To their rear, the dust clouds of Pharaoh's approaching army. The people cried out in terror, but Moses stood upon a jagged rock, his voice cutting through the panic. Fear not, stand firm and see the salvation of the Lord, he shouted. Moses stretched his hand over the sea, and a strong east wind began to howl, a divine breath that tore the very fabric of the deep. The impossible happened. The waters divided, rising up like translucent walls on the right and the left. Aaron and Miriam, Moses' sister, led the first rank into the canyon of the sea. The ground beneath them was dry, a miraculous path carved through the heart of the abyss. They walked through the belly of the sea, the roar of the wind, their only anthem. And so the Egyptian army charged into the gap, the wheels of their chariots swerving and clogging into the deepening mud of the seabed. Pharaoh and his guards realized too late that the trap was not for the Hebrews, but for them. As the last of the Israelites stepped into the far shore, Moses stretched his hand, and once more the walls of the water lost their resolve. With a sound like the world breaking apart, the sea collapsed. Pharaoh's scream was lost in the roar of the returning tide as the pride of Egypt was buried beneath the waves. On the shores of Midian, the air was filled with the new sound, the song of the sea. Miriam stood among the women, her timbrels ringing out as she sang, "Sing to the Lord, for he is triumphed gloriously." Moses joined the chorus, his heart finally light, but the desert was a harsh teacher. 3 days later, at the pools of Mirrah, the people complained of bitter water. Moses looked to the heavens. He cast a piece of wood into the pool as commanded, and the bitterness turned sweet. The journey was long, but the God who parted the sea would also sustain them in the waste.